Zeitoun, page 186, Sunday, September 11th. It had been 6 days since Kathy had spoken to Zeitoun. She could no longer explain his absence. It didn't make sense. The city was overrun with help. The National Guard was everywhere, and officials were insisting that the city was virtually empty. She ran the possibilities through her mind again. If he was still there, canoeing around New Orleans, he would have called again from the Claiborne house. If the Claiborne phone no longer worked, by now he would have found another working phone, or he would have encountered one of the soldiers and asked for help in contacting Kathy. There seemed to be no way that he was in the city and unable to call, which meant that he had left the city. He might have been running low on water or food. He might have accepted a ride out of the city from one of the helicopters or rescue boats. But if he had left and had been brought to a shelter, he would have called immediately. She knew that bodies had been found floating unclaimed and uncovered in the water. He could be dead, she told herself. Your husband could be gone. There had been murders, she knew. She did not truly believe the accounts of untethered mayhem, but she knew that some murders would have occurred. It could have been a robbery, she thought. Someone had come to steal from one of her properties. He had been there. He had fought back. He could not have drowned. He could not have fallen victim to any other sort of calamity. She knew her husband too well. She could not picture any accident taking him. He was too smart, too wary, and even if he had had some kind of incident, he was indestructible. He would have survived. He would have gotten help. When it was noon in New Orleans, Kathy called the Claiborne house. She let it ring, needing to hear her husband's voice, but still the ringing had no end. She had to think of life insurance. She had to think about how she would support her 4 children. Would she be able to run the business on her own? Of course not, but some semblance of it. She would have to sell the rental properties, or maybe the rental properties would be something she could manage on her own. Too many questions. No, she would sell the paintings and contracting business and hold on to the rentals. Or she could sell a few of the buildings, bring it down to a number she could manage on her own. Should she stay in New Orleans or have the family in Baton Rouge to Phoenix? It would have to be Phoenix. And how long would anyone wait before assuming the worst? 1 week? 2 weeks? 3? She got online and found another email from Ahmad. This one was sent to the TV station that had broadcast the brief interview with Zeitoun. From his office in Spain, Ahmad had found out which station it had been and found the name of one of the producers. From Cap Zeitoun. Subject: New Orleans hurricane-impacted areas. Dear Sires, as I informed from one friend in Baton Rouge that you have on September 5th meeting with my brother, name Abdulrahman Zeitoun, 47 years old, at New Orleans affected zone 4649 Dart Street, Louisiana, where he stayed. Our friend saw him on your TV, WAFB Channel 9, on September 6th. From that time till this moment, we lost the contact with him. Kindly would you please, can you give me any information about the day and time when you met him, or if you have any other information? Thank you indeed, Ahmad Zeitoun. Kathy found a website with current photos of New Orleans from the air. She searched until she found Uptown and zoomed in until she saw what was left of her home and neighborhood. The water was filthier than she could have imagined. It looked like the entire city was bathing in oil and tar. She called every number of every person she knew who might still be in New Orleans. Nothing. You can Ahmad consult her. He's old school, Ahmad said. It was normal for a man like Zeitoun, rugged and independent, to be out of contact for a few days. They don't make guys like that anymore. Yuko kept Kathy away from the phones and the news. Still, Kathy caught snippets in the car. In the Odyssey, she heard President Bush's weekly radio address. The president compared the storm to 9/11 and the war on terror. America is confronting another disaster that has caused destruction and loss of life, he said. America will overcome this ordeal, and we will be stronger for it. Monday, September 12th. It was time for the girls to start school. They had been out for almost 2 weeks now, and no matter how awkward it might be to start classes in the middle of September, they needed some semblance of routine. Kathy made the calls. The closest public school was Dr. Howard K. Conley Elementary School. Bring them right away, Kathy was told. Zach, as a high schooler, would have a more difficult entry. The girls were nervous. They were not happy to be brought to a new school where they knew no one and where they would be branded as refugees. Why couldn't they just wait until they returned to New Orleans? What would they study? The books and lesson plans would be different. What was the point? The point, Kathy said, was that their father wanted them in school, and that was enough. Yuko and Ahmad brought the girls a new set of school supplies, binders and notebooks, and pens and pencils, and Pokemon and Hello Kitty backpacks to carry all of it. This gave the girls some measure of comfort, but when Kathy dropped them off, leaving them all in the office of the kindly principal, she was devastated. She couldn't look at Aisha. Everything was in that girl's wet black eyes, every worry Kathy shared, that these were the first days of their new life together, living in Phoenix without their father. Driving away from the school, Kathy caught the news on the radio. The official death toll in New Orleans was now 279. It seemed to be leaping by 100 a day, and the search for bodies had only just begun. Did she have to prepare for a funeral? It had been several days now. How long could she explain away his absence? President Bush had come to New Orleans 2 or 3 times at that point. If the president could make his way to Jackson Square for a press conference, her husband, if alive, could find a phone and call out. Tuesday, September 13. With the kids at school during the day, Kathy spiraled downward. She had more time to herself and more time to worry, more time to plan a wretched new life. She called the house on Claiborne every hour. She called Zeitoun's cell phone in case he found some place to charge it. The death toll jumped to 423. She found Todd Gambio's girlfriend's number and called her. She was in Mississippi and hadn't heard from Todd in a week. This meant something. Perhaps something had happened to both of them. This was good news. It had to be. The two women agreed to stay in touch. From Spain, Ahmad called Kathy every day. He called the Coast Guard and the Navy. He wrote to the Syrian embassy in Washington. Nothing from anyone. He looked into flights to New Orleans. What could it hurt to have him searching for his brother on the ground? He worried that his siblings expected him to go, given that he was the only one who might have any chance at all of entering the United States. Getting a visa from Syria was hopeless. His wife ruled out the notion, but still the idea burrowed in him. Wednesday, September 14th. The death toll was at 648 and climbing. Kathy checked in with the Red Cross every day. She soon had Zeitoun registered at half a dozen agencies dealing with missing persons. His photo was everywhere. The girls went to school, came home, watched TV. They found momentary distraction with Yuko and Ahmad's kids, but their eyes were hollow. They too were planning lives without their father. Did they want to move to Phoenix? Would there be a funeral? When would they know what had happened? In the countless hours of darkening thoughts, Kathy imagined again where she would live. Could she live in Arizona? She would have to find a house near Yuko's. Ahmad would have to be a father figure. Kathy had already leaned so heavily on Yuko and Ahmad, she couldn't imagine permanently thrusting her entire family onto them. She thought of Zeitoun's family in Syria. There was such a support network there, a vast and tight fabric of family. She and Zeitoun had brought the kids there in 2003 for 2 weeks to visit, and it had been unlike anything she expected. First, there was the snow in Damascus. They'd taken a bus north to Jabala, and all along she'd been shocked at what she saw. She later admitted, an antique idea of Syria. She pictured deserts, donkeys, and carts. Not so many busy cosmopolitan cities. Not so many Mercedes and BMW dealerships lining the highway heading north. Not so many women in tight clothes and uncovered hair. But there were vestiges of less modern life, too. Merchants selling sardines and cabbage out by the roadside. Crude homes of brick and mud. As they drove north to Jabala, the road soon met the coastline, and they traveled along a beautiful seaside stretch, hills cascading to the sea, mosques perched above the road, side by side with churches, dozens of them, she assumed. Syria was entirely Muslim, but she was wrong about this, and about so many things. She loved being surprised, coming to realize that in many ways Syria was a quintessentially Mediterranean country, connected to the sea and in love with food and new ideas and reflecting the influence of Greece, Italy, so many cultures. Kathy devoured it all, the fresh vegetables and fish, the yogurts, the lamb. The lamb was the best she'd had anywhere, and she ate it whenever she had the opportunity. In beautiful seaside Jabla, she seen the homes that Zeitoun's grandfather had built and saw the monument to his brother Muhammad. They stayed with Kauski Admiran's wonderful, life-loving, and gregarious brother who still lived in their childhood home. It was a gorgeous old place on the water with high ceilings and windows always open to sea breezes. There was family everywhere within walking distance, so many cousins, so much history. While Zeitoun darted around town, reconnecting with old friends, Kathy had spent an afternoon cooking with Zeitoun's sister, Fazia, and she'd done something wrong with the propane and almost burned down the kitchen. It was terrifying at the time, but made for so much hilarity in the coming days. They were such good people, her husband's family, everyone so well educated, so open and hospitable, each of their houses full of constant laughter. Would it be impossible to think that Kathy could take the kids and live there, in Jabala? It was a radical idea, but one that would put her in a place of such comfort, embraced by family. The girls would be surrounded by so many relatives, perhaps they wouldn't be quite so devastated at the loss of their dad. Zeitoun's family in Syria became increasingly despondent and resigned to the loss of Adarman. There were so many bodies being found, almost 700 in New Orleans. Their brother was surely one of them. To believe otherwise was folly. Now they just wanted the peace of mind of knowing how he had died. They wanted his body, to cleanse it, to bury him.